A millionaire hired a new housekeeper to take care of his sick daughter, but one day he came home early, and what he saw left him shocked. Nathan Caldwell's house sat in the heart of Beacon Hill, elegant and imposing, yet quiet in a way that whispered sorrow. Since the diagnosis of his 8-year-old daughter Lily, Nathan's world had narrowed to boardrooms, hospital reports, and silence. Once known as Boston's most dynamic entrepreneur, he had become a man of routine and detachment, buried under the weight of responsibility and guilt. It had been 6 months since Lily was diagnosed with a rare neuromuscular condition that gradually weakened her ability to walk and perform basic tasks. Nathan, despite all his resources, couldn't stop the progression. The best doctors, the most expensive treatments, and still, her small frame had grown more fragile, her smiles more infrequent. The last caregiver had lasted 3 weeks. Before that, 4 others had come and gone. None had managed to stay. Nathan hadn't meant to be distant, but between the collapsing merger of Caldwell Biotech and endless medical consultations, his moments with Lily became reduced to nighttime check-ins and the occasional breakfast, where he'd sit across from her at the long dining table, trying to bridge a silence that neither of them knew how to break. His assistant, Marcia, had taken the lead on finding a new caregiver, scouring agencies and vetting resumes. That's how Elise Turner entered their lives. Elise was 32, soft-spoken, with a confident calm. Her resume included pediatric nursing, private home care, and a notable stint volunteering in pediatric palliative units. But it was the tone in her voice during the interview that caught Nathan off guard. Not pity, not professional detachment, but something warmer, human, real. She didn't ask about salary or hours. She asked about Lily. "What does she love?" Elise had said. Nathan had paused, uncomfortably aware that he didn't have an answer. "Books," he replied, remembering. The stacks that Marcia had ordered from Amazon. And animals. "Any favorites?" He hesitated again. "She used to like whales." That was enough for Elise. She moved in the following Monday, taking up the guest room on the 2nd floor next to Lily's. She brought only 2 suitcases and a worn-out copy of Charlotte's Web. The first few days, Nathan didn't see much of her. He left early, returned late, but he noticed subtle shifts, a trail of crayons on the kitchen counter, faint laughter coming from the garden, new picture books by Lily's bed. Lily, who hadn't smiled in weeks, began to respond to Elise, first with quiet nods, then with whispered replies, and finally full laughter. Nathan heard it one evening as he stood outside Lily's room, paused mid-email, frozen by a sound he thought he might never hear again. It was light, unrestrained, and so purely childlike that it pulled something deep from within him. One morning, as Nathan passed by the living room, he noticed a blanket fort set up beside the couch. Inside, Lily lay with a flashlight, reading while Elise narrated dramatically from a book about sea creatures. The room, usually pristine and sterile, was now a canvas of color, cushions, and life. When he looked in on Lily that night, she was asleep, clutching a stuffed whale he didn't recognize. Her face was calm, her breathing soft. For the first time in what felt like years, she looked like a child. At breakfast the next day, Lily sat up straighter. "Elise made pancakes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan blinked, surprised. "You ate?" she nodded. "With blueberries." Elise entered a moment later, carrying coffee. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell," she said with a polite smile. Nathan returned the greeting, unsure how to respond to the strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't discomfort. It was gratitude, relief. In the days that followed, Elise established a quiet rhythm in the house. She never overstepped. She didn't try to befriend Nathan, nor did she make herself invisible. She simply existed, present, consistent, and gentle. Lily grew more responsive, more curious. She began drawing again, mostly whales and underwater scenes. Nathan noticed them taped on her bedroom walls. One Friday evening, as he returned home earlier than usual, he found Elise and Lily on the back porch, watching the sunset wrapped in a blanket. Lily was resting her head on Elise's shoulder, a faint smile on her lips. "Hi, Daddy," she called out, raising a small hand. Nathan felt something shift. Maybe it was the way the orange light caught Lily's eyes, or the quiet way Elise looked up, not startled, just calm. He nodded, unsure what to say. Later that night, he found himself in his office, staring at the file Marcia had prepared on Elise. He reread her references, her work history, the letters of recommendation. All glowing, all formal. Yet none of them mentioned what he saw today, how she could make a child who had forgotten how to smile light up again, with nothing but a blanket, a story, and a sunset. Nathan closed the file and sat back. For the first time in months, he didn't feel entirely helpless. Elise Turner had been hired to care for his daughter, but in just 1 week it seemed she had begun to bring something else into their home, something he hadn't realized was missing. Warmth. And maybe, just maybe, hope. It was subtle at first, a lift at the corners of Lily's mouth, the kind of almost smile a parent might miss if they weren't paying close attention. But Nathan wasn't just noticing. He was watching, studying her as if trying to learn the language of his daughter all over again. He observed from the doorway just out of sight as Lily giggled softly while Elise animatedly described a whale diving into an ocean made entirely of jelly beans. The scene was almost surreal in its simplicity. A child wrapped in a blanket, legs folded beside a nurse who had, in a matter of days, shifted the energy of an entire household. Nathan had grown used to silence. Since his wife had left, or rather since he had let her go, the house had become a place of necessity rather than warmth. Conversations were reduced to logistics, meals were eaten in fragments, usually alone. Rooms stayed dark unless occupied, and the staff kept to their tasks with quiet efficiency. But now there were hints of life in places that had long been dormant. Lily's room had changed the most. Once a sterile haven of medical equipment and symmetry, it was now layered with drawings, stuffed animals, and tiny decorative lights that Elise had installed along the edge of the window. Sea creatures dominated every surface: whales, dolphins, seahorses. Each new day brought a new creation, and each new creation brought with it a little more color into the once gray space. Nathan noticed other things too. Small changes that hadn't existed before Elise. A purple mug, Elise's, left drying near the sink. A folded sweater on the back of the couch. A melody hummed from upstairs while Lily was getting ready for bed. And then there were the questions, not from Elise but from Lily. She had begun to ask things, childish, curious, innocent questions. "Why do whales talk under the water?" she had asked Elise during lunch one afternoon. "They use something called echolocation," Elise replied. "It's like singing, but it helps them find their way." Lily nodded, processing the answer with the solemnity only children could achieve. "And do they miss their moms?" Elise didn't answer immediately. Her hand paused as she wiped the table. Nathan, who was watching from his seat across the room, noted the tension that flickered briefly across her features before she smiled and said, "Yes, I think they do." The conversation lingered with Nathan longer than he expected. That night, he found himself scrolling through old photos on his phone. Images of Lily laughing on a beach, covered in sand, wearing oversized sunglasses. Beside her was Madison, her mother, with the same sea-blue eyes and that effortless way of making Lily smile without needing words. Those days felt like someone else's memories now, polished and distant. At dinner a few nights later, Nathan attempted something rare: conversation. "How was your day?" he asked Lily. She looked up from her plate, startled at first. "Good," she said quietly. "Elise said you painted something new." "A blue whale," Lily said, then glanced at Elise, as if seeking permission to elaborate. "It's beautiful," Elise encouraged, smiling. Nathan smiled too, though awkwardly. "Can I see it later?" Lily nodded, and Nathan felt the faintest crack in the invisible wall between them. But something else began to catch his attention. Lily never spoke about Madison, not in passing, not in bedtime stories, not even when Elise asked her about family. It was as if her mother had been quietly erased from her narrative. Nathan didn't understand it. Even in grief, even in distance, children clung to what they lost. But Lily treated the subject like a door she refused to open. One evening, after Lily had gone to sleep, Nathan found Elise in the kitchen organizing medication schedules. The light above the island was warm, casting soft shadows around her face. She looked up, surprised by his presence. "Thank you," he said simply. She tilted her head. "For what?" For everything." "She's smiling again." Elise gave a gentle nod, her tone careful. "She's an extraordinary little girl. Sometimes they just need to feel safe." Nathan nodded, hesitating before voicing the question that had been on his mind. "She doesn't talk about her mother, not even with you." Elise's hands stilled. "No," she said softly. "She avoids the topic. I didn't want to push." Nathan appreciated that. He had always admired restraint. It was the backbone of his business, after all. But here, in his own home, it felt like something more. Respect. That night, Nathan lay awake longer than usual. He thought about how Lily had changed in such a short time, how Elise had brought something into their lives that money couldn't. Buy couldn't manufacture. Still, part of him remained skeptical. People didn't just appear and transform lives without reason. Especially not in his world, where every transaction had a motive, and every relationship came with an expiration date. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. Lily had begun to draw again. She spoke more, ate better, smiled. That alone was more than any medical report had been able to promise. One Saturday morning, Nathan entered Lily's room with the intention of telling her he would be working from home. Instead, he found her and Elise mid-paint session. Newspapers spread across the floor, watercolor palettes open, music playing. Softly from a speaker, Lily beamed when she saw him. "Daddy, look!" She held up a painting, a large whale with shimmering blue streaks and a heart above its head. "It's amazing," Nathan said, walking closer. "What's its name?" "Ilara," Lily said confidently. "Ilara the whale," Nathan repeated, sitting beside them on the floor for the first time in years. "She's magic," Lily whispered. "She sings songs that make people feel better." Nathan exchanged a glance with Elise, who simply smiled and returned to washing. A brush. He stayed longer than planned that morning, helped Lily with a new drawing, even painted a clumsy dolphin that made her laugh so hard she almost knocked over the water jar. When she hugged him afterward, it wasn't the careful, timid embrace of a sick child. It was full, warm, trusting. As Nathan left the room, he paused by the doorway and looked back. He saw not a nurse and a patient, not a businessman's daughter and a hired employee, but something else entirely, something deeper, a bond forming, a space being filled that had once been hollow. And as he walked away, he realized something had changed in him too. Elise hadn't just brought joy to Lily. She had awakened something in Nathan that he had buried for too long, a sense of connection, a reason to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. The morning started like any other. A faint drizzle tapped against the windows, and the skies over Boston held the kind of gray that promised rain for the rest of the day. Nathan was already dressed, tie loosened, coffee cooling in his hand as he reviewed documents from the comfort of his home office. He'd decided to skip going into the company headquarters today, not because of the weather, but because of something far less definable. Something about the house had changed, and whether he admitted it or not, he wanted to be near it. From upstairs came the sound of light footsteps, followed by a burst of laughter. Lily's. Nathan paused mid-sentence, a pen in his hand, and waited. Another giggle floated down the stairs, and a second later he heard Elise's voice, soft but animated, as she guided Lily toward the breakfast table. That was the new rhythm of the house. The once cavernous spaces now felt full, not because more people had moved in, but because the right person had. Nathan emerged from the office just in time to see Lily climbing onto a kitchen stool, her arms steady, her back straighter than he'd seen in months. Elise stood close, watchful but relaxed, letting Lily move at her own pace. Nathan offered a quiet nod as he approached, and Elise returned it with a half-smile that he had come to recognize as her way of saying, "We're okay." Lily munched on a slice of toast, kicking her feet gently beneath the stool. Her eyes lit up when she saw Nathan sit beside her. "Daddy, guess what?" He smiled. "What?" "I remembered all the names of the whale family from the book Elise read me." "That's impressive," he said, genuinely curious. "Which one's your favorite?" She tapped her chin thoughtfully, her brow furrowing in concentration. "The baby one, because he tries really hard even when he's scared." Nathan glanced at Elise, whose eyes remained fixed on the child with a kind of quiet pride that couldn't be faked. It was then, between bites of toast and sips of orange juice, that Lily suddenly asked a question that froze the room in place. "Elise, are you going to leave like the others did?" The words came out softly, but they landed with weight. Nathan saw Elise's expression falter just slightly, a flicker of something behind her eyes. The question was too honest, too raw, the kind that adults often spend a lifetime avoiding. "I don't want you to go," Lily added quickly, looking down at her plate as if ashamed of the thought. Nathan didn't move. He didn't even breathe. He realized in that moment that he didn't know the answer either. Elise crouched to Lily's level, her voice low and calm. "I don't want to go anywhere, sweetie." "But the others said that too," Lily whispered. Elise reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. "I can't speak for them," she said, "but I'm here because I want to be, not just because it's my job." Lily gave a small nod, still avoiding eye contact, as though she wasn't sure whether to believe her. Nathan sat back in his chair, stunned by the simplicity of the moment and the depth of the truth it had revealed. He had hired Elise through formal channels, with contracts and references and expectations. But he hadn't asked her why she chose this line of work, why she had stayed longer than any other caregiver, why, when every other nurse had quietly packed up and left without much explanation, Elise had remained and brought light back into his daughter's life. After breakfast, Lily wandered off to the sunroom, dragging a book behind her. Elise began clearing the dishes, her movements quiet. Nathan spoke, not looking up. "How many came before you?" Elise paused. "Marcia said 4, but I don't know much beyond that." "It was 5, Nathan said, setting down his cup. "Each one lasted less than a month. One left in the middle of the night." She turned to face him, brow raised. "I didn't ask too many questions back then," he admitted. "I trusted the agencies, let them handle it. I figured the job was hard, the hours long, and Lily—" His voice caught slightly. "She wasn't easy to reach after Madison left." Elise leaned against the counter, arms folded. "It's not about the hours, Nathan." He looked up at her then, really looked. "What is it about?" She shook her head slowly. "Some people walk into this kind of work, thinking they'll change a life, that their compassion will be enough. But children, especially those who've been hurt, they know when someone's heart isn't really there. They can feel it. You can't fake that kind of presence." Nathan considered her words carefully. "And you?" Elise's eyes softened. "I didn't come here to fix anything. I just wanted her to feel safe." He nodded, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that had been growing slowly and silently, like roots beneath the surface. Later that day, while Lily napped upstairs, Nathan found himself in the hallway, standing before a closed closet door. It was the one he hadn't opened in months, the one filled with forgotten belongings and silent memories. Inside were old toys, outgrown clothes, and notebooks from a time before the diagnosis. He sat down and began to go through them one by one, wondering what had been lost during the chaos. He found a photo, Lily at 4 years old, arms around a stuffed dolphin, standing beside Madison on the beach. They looked inseparable. That version of his family seemed like a distant memory now, fragile and unreachable. And yet, he couldn't ignore the way Lily had started to bloom again, not just physically but emotionally. The walls she had built were thinning, if not yet gone. That night, Elise was reading by the fireplace while Nathan reviewed documents on his laptop nearby. Lily was already in bed. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now, peaceful, not hollow. "She asked you a hard question this morning," Nathan said, breaking the silence. Elise looked up, nodding. She's braver than she thinks. She's afraid you'll leave. I know. Nathan studied her, then asked the question he had been avoiding. Will you? Elise didn't answer right away. Instead, she closed her book and looked into the fire. I can't promise forever, Nathan. No one can, but I'm not going anywhere right now, not unless I have to. Her answer was honest, grounded. It wasn't what Nathan wanted to hear, but it was what he needed to hear. For the first time, he realized that stability didn't come from guarantees. It came from presence, from people showing up day after day, even when they didn't have to. The next morning, Lily woke up early. Nathan found her sitting by the window drawing. He sat beside her, and for a while neither of them spoke. Then Lily leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, Elise stayed. He nodded, placing his arm gently around her. She did. And in that quiet moment, with the rain tapping against the window pane and a child leaning into trust, Nathan understood something vital. It wasn't about hiring the best caregiver. It was about finally seeing what he had missed all along. That healing, real healing, didn't start with doctors or money or medicine. It started with someone being there. The storm had arrived without warning, blanketing the Caldwell estate in a cascade of wind and cold rain. The usually crisp view of the Charles River was now a blur behind fogged glass, and the stately trees lining the backyard bent under the weight of the weather. Nathan sat in his study, the fire crackling softly behind him, trying to concentrate on the quarterly reports scattered across his desk. But no number on a spreadsheet could match the pull of the thoughts that had been growing louder in his mind over the past few weeks. Elise had become more than a caregiver, that much was clear. The house had softened around her presence, and Lily had blossomed in a way no one could have predicted. Yet there was something else Nathan couldn't ignore, a tension just beneath the surface. Not mistrust exactly, but something unsettled. Elise was careful, not with Lily. There, she was open and free, but with Nathan. Their conversations, though warm, never ventured too far beyond the immediate. She guarded pieces of herself, and Nathan, despite all his instincts in business, couldn't decipher what lay behind her thoughtful silences. That afternoon, he decided to organize some old files. It was a task he had postponed for months, and, with the storm rendering travel impossible, it seemed like the right time. The office closet was full of bankers' boxes, most labeled with contracts, invoices, and legal documents. Near the bottom of one stack, he found a smaller, unmarked box, in old, slightly dusty and clearly untouched for years. Curiosity overrode his usual disinterest. He pulled it onto the desk and opened it, revealing a collection of miscellaneous items. A few outdated IDs from former staff, some photographs, and a folder that didn't belong to any business file. Inside the folder, among some of Lily's preschool drawings and old-school certificates, was a single sheet of handwritten paper. The paper was yellowed slightly at the edges, the handwriting delicate but firm. As he read the letter, his breath caught. It was a farewell note from one of Lily's previous caregivers, dated nearly a year ago. Mr. Caldwell, I'm sorry to leave this way. I know it's unprofessional, and I wish I could explain everything in person. But the truth is, I don't feel safe here. Not because of Lily, she is the sweetest soul I've met. But there is a heaviness in this house, a kind of silence that speaks louder than words. It's not my place to judge, but I can't stay. Something is always watching, and it never feels like just the cameras. I hope you understand. There was no signature, only the initials CW. Nathan sat frozen, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. He reread it twice, searching for clarity in the vagueness. What had she meant by something always watching? At first he wondered if it was paranoia, a caregiver overwhelmed by the solitude of the estate. But the tone was not frantic, it was measured, and more importantly, it was personal. This woman had cared for Lily and still left without warning. Why hadn't he seen this before? He tried to recall CW, piecing together a face or a voice from the long list of names Marcia had once handed him. But the details were lost. They always had been. He had never gotten involved in the process, never asked the right questions. Everything had been handled through intermediaries, approved and signed without a second glance. His first impulse was to ask Elise about it. She had gone through the same channels. Maybe she had heard something, but even as the thought formed, he stopped himself. This was his burden, not hers. Whatever had driven CW to leave had been during a time when the house was a shell, when his presence was more ghost than father. Nathan folded the letter and placed it back in the folder, but he couldn't forget the words. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, he found himself staring at the security monitors in the study. Most of the cameras hadn't been touched in months, relics of an overly cautious installation during the early days of Madison's absence, when fear had driven his need for control. He clicked through the footage, skipping dates, until he landed on a window from 8 months ago, the time CW had likely been in the house. He watched a few segments, the living room empty, the kitchen quiet, Lily's room dark except for a nightlight shaped like a jellyfish. And then he saw it was a clip from the hallway outside Lily's room. The timestamp read 3:32 in the morning. Lily sat on the floor back against the wall, her small body trembling barely more than a shadow. CW appeared moments later, walking hurriedly, her robe loosely tied, face tight with concern. She scooped Lily into her arms and disappeared, into the room. The video ended there. Nathan leaned back, uneasy. There was no sound, no indication of what had frightened Lily, but the fear in her body language was unmistakable. He fast-forwarded to the next morning. Lily emerged from the room, hand in hand with CW, but there was no smile, just silence. Had she been waking up alone that often? Was that what the letter meant by always watching? The loneliness of a child left with strangers while her father buried himself in work. He rubbed his forehead, the weight of old guilt settling in his chest. Lily had been trying to tell him something for a long time in her quiet way, not through words, but through distance, through silence. And he had missed it. The next day, Nathan kept the letter in his pocket. He went about his routine, but he watched Elise and Lily with new eyes. There was something sacred about the way Elise moved through the house, not just efficient, reverent. She never treated Lily like a patient, never acted like she was performing a task. She engaged. She listened. She noticed things Nathan never had. At lunch, Lily chatted about a new sea turtle figurine Elise had brought home from a shop downtown. Elise asked her questions, let her take the lead in the conversation. It was effortless, natural. Nathan envied it and admired it at once. After the meal, when Lily returned to her room, Nathan found himself standing in the kitchen, the letter burning against his thigh. "Did you know any of the others?" he asked suddenly. Elise turned, caught off guard. "The caregivers." He nodded. "Only by reputation," she said carefully. "Some of them worked through the same network." "Why?" "There was a letter," Nathan said, "from one of them. Said something about not feeling comfortable in the house, that she didn't feel safe." Elise's gaze shifted slightly. "Was it CW? You knew her?" "We met once, briefly." Nathan leaned against the counter. "Do you think she was telling the truth?" Elise hesitated, then said, "I think people experience silence in different ways. Some hear peace, others hear everything they've been trying to ignore." Nathan absorbed that, unsure whether she was talking about CW, about the house, or about him. That night, he walked past Lily's room before bed. Inside, Elise was reading from the Whale book, her voice calm and melodic. Lily's eyes fluttered closed as she leaned into her pillow, her hand resting near Elise's arm. There was no fear, no unease, just trust. Nathan stepped away, the letter still folded in his pocket. He didn't know what CW had sensed back then. But tonight the house didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. The days following the discovery of the letter were marked by a subtle shift in Nathan's awareness. He moved through the house with heightened perception, noticing every glance, every pause, every unexplained sound that echoed through the long hallways. The letter had unsettled something inside him, not because he believed in ghosts or anything so dramatic, but because it reminded him of how disconnected he had been. If there had been signs of discomfort in his home, signs of fear, he had ignored them. Worse, he had allowed them to become someone else's burden, but things had changed now. He was paying attention. One rainy evening with Lily already asleep, and Elise in the sunroom reading as she often did after putting Lily to bed, Nathan found himself in his office again, drawn back to the security system. He had barely touched it in the past year, relying instead on the team who monitored the feeds remotely. But that night, he sat in front of the large screen, navigating through months of archived footage with a slow, deliberate rhythm. His eyes were tired, and most of the recordings were uneventful. Empty rooms, quiet halls, the occasional flash of staff moving through the kitchen or housekeeping collecting linens from the upper floor. It was strange watching his own life from a distance, realizing how impersonal it all seemed. But then he found a folder dated from 2 months earlier, a time shortly after Elise had been hired. He clicked into the files, eyes scanning through the list of timestamps. One file stood out. The time was odd, 2:41 in the morning. A motion alert from Lily's room. He clicked it. The footage opened with the quiet frame of Lily's bedroom, dimly lit by the soft underwater-themed nightlight beside her bed. At first, the room appeared still. Lily's small figure lay curled under the covers, but her movements were restless. Within seconds, she sat up, eyes wide and glistening in the soft light. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and lowered herself to the floor. She wasn't crying out, just breathing heavily, her hands clenched at her sides. A few moments passed. Then the door opened gently. Elise entered. She wasn't in uniform. She wore a long cardigan over pajamas, and her hair was loosely tied back. In one hand, she held a thick book. Without turning on any additional lights, she crossed the room and knelt beside Lily, whispering something the camera's microphone didn't pick up. Lily looked up at her, tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. Elise didn't panic. She didn't lecture or ask why Lily was out of bed. She simply sat beside her, opened the book and began to read. The camera remained fixed, capturing the two of them in a pool of golden nightlight. Elise read slowly, turning the pages with deliberate care. Lily leaned against her, slowly relaxing as the words flowed. Within minutes, the child's breathing calmed, her posture softened. Eventually, Elise closed the book, adjusted the blanket around Lily, and helped her back into bed. She stayed there, seated on the edge, until Lily drifted into sleep again. Then, as quietly as she had come, she left the room. Nathan sat in silence for a long time after the video ended. No one had told him about that night. Elise had never mentioned it. Lily had never brought it up, and yet it was there, recorded, in the data he had ignored for months. Not a dramatic scene, not a crisis, just an act of love, of presence, something Nathan himself had failed to offer so many times before. He rewound the footage and watched it again, this time focusing not on Lily, but on Elise. Her calm, her patience, the way she handled the moment, not with efficiency but with humanity. It struck him how rare that was, not just in employees or caregivers, but in people in general. There had been no cameras in the sunroom, no supervisors to impress, no audience for her performance. What she had done only for Lily. And somehow Nathan had missed all of it. Later that night, unable to sleep, he walked through the house in the dark. He passed Lily's door and paused, listening. No sounds, no restlessness. Just the quiet rhythm of a child breathing deeply in sleep. He continued down the hall, stopping when he reached the sunroom. Through the glass doors he saw Elise sitting on the couch, her legs curled under her, book resting on her lap, her gaze distant. He knocked gently and opened the door. Elise looked up, not startled, just expectant. "Everything all right?" she asked. Nathan nodded. "I was going through some of the security footage." Her posture shifted slightly. "Looking for something?" He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "I found a video from Lily's room about 2 months ago. It was the middle of the night." Elise held his gaze. "She had a nightmare. I didn't want to wake you." "You read to her," Nathan said, "for almost an hour." "I've done that a few times," she said simply. He didn't respond immediately. The fire from the hallway cast flickering shadows through the room, painting the walls in gold and orange. "I never would have known," he said finally. "You never said anything." "I wasn't doing it for recognition." He studied her. "Then why?" Elise looked down at the book in her lap, then back up at him. "Because she needed someone, and because I know what it's like to be awake in the middle of the night and not want to be alone." Nathan absorbed her words in silence. He walked toward the window, the glass cool beneath his fingertips as he looked out into the storm-dark yard. "Do you think she remembers those nights?" Elise joined him by the window, standing just a little apart. "Maybe not with details, but I think children remember how people made them feel. Safe, seen, loved. That stays, even when the memories fade." Nathan turned to her. "I didn't know how to help her. I still don't." "You're helping now," she said. "You're here." Her voice wasn't accusing or defensive, it was steady, reassuring. And yet, Nathan felt the weight of the past pressing against his shoulders. The missed dinners, the unanswered questions, the quiet pain of a child who had waited too long for her father to notice. "You're the first person she's trusted since Madison left," he said. "That means something." Elise looked down, her fingers fidgeting slightly. "She's easy to love." Nathan nodded slowly. "So are you." The words hung in the air between them, too honest to be casual, too quiet to be denied. Elise met his eyes, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just that space. No past, no future, just the truth of the present. She didn't reply, and he didn't press. Instead, he turned and walked back toward the hallway, pausing at the door. "Thank you," he said, voice low. "For what?" she asked. "For not letting her be alone." Then he left, the echo of his steps, barely audible over the storm, still murmuring outside. Upstairs, Lily slept soundly, unaware of the video that had reshaped her father's understanding. And downstairs in the sunroom, Elise returned to her book, but her fingers no longer moved across the page. She sat still for a long time, staring out into the dark. The stillness of the Caldwell house at night had become familiar to Elise. It was a kind of quiet that wasn't unnerving but rather expectant, as if the walls themselves had paused to listen, waiting for something meaningful to unfold. Most nights, once Lily had fallen asleep and Nathan had retreated to his office or bedroom, Elise would find a sliver of time for herself. Sometimes it was a chapter of a book, sometimes writing in a small journal she kept in her drawer, sometimes simply sitting in the silence with her thoughts. But on one particular evening, as spring rain tapped gently against the glass windows, something shifted. Elise sat in the kitchen, cup of tea in hand, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low, deliberate. She thought she was alone, but a figure moved quietly down the hallway, Nathan, returning from his office to retrieve a forgotten tablet. As he approached the kitchen, he slowed at the sound of Elise's voice, not intending to eavesdrop but not eager to interrupt either. "I didn't expect it to be like this," Elise was saying, her tone softer than usual. "She's different. This one, I don't know. She looks at me like she's waiting for something I'm not sure I can give." There was a pause, a quiet breath. "I promised I wouldn't get attached, that I'd do the job and keep my distance, but she's not like the others. She's quiet, but she listens with her whole soul. It's like she sees right through me." Another pause, heavier this time. "No, I haven't told him. I don't think he'd understand." Nathan remained still, a strange tightness forming in his chest. He didn't want to intrude, but every instinct he had told him this moment wasn't meant for him, and yet it had found him anyway. "I keep thinking about what happened last time," Elise continued. "And I don't know if I can go through. So that again. But I also don't know how to walk away from her." The call ended a few seconds later. Elise sat quietly, her hands wrapped around her mug, eyes lost in thought. Nathan backed away before she could see him, retreating upstairs with the tablet under his arm, though he would not use it that night. He lay awake instead, the words repeating themselves in his mind. "I promised I wouldn't get attached. She's not like the others. I don't know how to walk away from her." What had happened last time? Who was Elise talking to? And more pressing, what was she hiding? The next morning, nothing appeared different. Elise greeted Lily with her usual warmth, helped her, dressed, prepared breakfast, and guided her through a few light stretching exercises the doctors had recommended. Lily laughed during breakfast when Nathan made a joke about the soggy cereal he used to eat as a child, and Elise added her own dry remark about food crimes, making Lily giggle even harder. But Nathan watched Elise more closely. Her smile reached her eyes, but there was something else there, a flicker of tension as if part of her was somewhere else. He noticed how she lingered in Lily's room a moment longer after their usual activities, how her fingers played absent-mindedly with the bracelet on her wrist while Lily spoke, how her gaze shifted toward the front windows when the wind changed. That evening, after Lily had gone to sleep, Nathan invited Elise to join him in the sitting room. The fireplace was lit, casting a warm glow across the bookshelves and leather chairs. Elise entered with a slight tilt of her head, curious but not suspicious. "You've made a difference here," Nathan said as she sat down across from him. "In this house, in Lily." "I'm glad," she said, folding her hands in her lap. "I mean it," he continued. "I've seen how she looks at you, how she trusts you. That's not something that comes easy for her." Elise nodded, but her eyes were careful, watchful. Nathan leaned forward. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "The other night, I overheard part of a call you made. I didn't mean to. I was walking through the hall." She went still, the color in her face draining just slightly. "You said you promised you wouldn't get attached," he continued, "and that something had happened before, something that made you think twice about staying." Elise didn't speak for a long moment. Then she looked down at her hands and sighed. "I'm not proud of what I said," she began, "but I wasn't lying." Nathan said nothing, letting her fill the space at her own pace. "I had a sister," she said. "Her name was Claire. She was only 14 when she got sick. Same condition Lily has. Hers progressed faster than anyone expected." Nathan's breath caught. The pieces began to form a picture he hadn't imagined. "I was already in nursing school when she was diagnosed," Elise continued. "And I tried everything. I spent nights reading studies, pestering doctors, pushing for treatments that never came. I thought if I just worked harder, I could save her." Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't stop. "She died 3 years ago, and I've been trying to atone for that ever since." Nathan's voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "By taking care of girls like Lily." "Yes, but it was different before. Detached, like fulfilling a penance." She looked up, eyes glistening. "But Lily isn't just another child. She's not just a reminder of what I lost. She's her own person. And I see her fighting so hard every day, and I see how she looks at me, and it scares me." "Why?" Nathan asked. "Because I don't know if I can survive losing her too." The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. Nathan reached for her hand. She hesitated for a moment, then let him hold it. "You're not going to lose her," he said. "Not if we can help it, and you don't have to do this alone." Elise closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I didn't mean to get this close. And I didn't mean to care." "This much," Nathan replied, his voice low. "But here we are." Outside, the rain had started again, gentle and steady. The house, for all its stillness, felt full again. Not with noise, but with truth. Nathan realized that whatever came next, it wouldn't be easy, but it would be real. And that, more than anything, was a beginning. The morning after Elise's quiet confession, the atmosphere in the Caldwell home shifted again, not in a jarring way, but subtly, as if an invisible curtain had been drawn back to let in more light. Nathan awoke with the memory of her voice still echoing in his head, the rawness of her words lingering long after they'd parted. He couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him with such naked truth, not in a meeting, not in courtrooms or corporate retreats, not even in the rare moments of vulnerability with Madison. Elise had opened a part of herself that few ever dared show, and Nathan found himself unsettled not by the sadness of her story, but by the sincerity of her grief, and the courage it took to reveal it. He left his room earlier than usual, bypassing the neatly prepared breakfast tray left by the housekeeper. Instead, he made his way to Lily's room, knocking gently before entering. He found Elise sitting on the rug with Lily, both of them surrounded by watercolor brushes and wide sheets of paper, each depicting scenes from a world beneath the sea. Lily beamed when she saw her father, her fingers already stained blue and green. "Daddy, look," she said, holding up her newest creation, a school of dolphins arcing over waves made of glitter paint. "This one's for your office." Nathan took the picture and studied it with exaggerated seriousness. "It's perfect," he said, crouching down beside her. "I think it'll scare the numbers right off my spreadsheets." Lily giggled, leaning into Elise with ease. It was in that moment, her natural tilt toward Elise, the absence of hesitation, that Nathan truly saw the bond they had built. It wasn't forced. It wasn't even learned. It was instinctive. Lily trusted Elise in a way that transcended instruction or time. That kind of trust only bloomed in presence, in consistency, in the quiet, unglamorous work of showing up again and again. "Can I help?" Nathan asked, gesturing to the paints. Lily's eyes widened. "You want to paint?" "Sure, but fair warning, I haven't painted since I was your age." Elise smiled but said nothing, passing him a brush. Nathan dipped it into a swirl of deep indigo and began to mimic the patterns Lily had made. They spent the next 30 minutes in laughter, each brushstroke loosening something stiff and long-held inside Nathan. He realized he wasn't performing for Lily. He wasn't ticking off a parenting box. He was simply present, and it was enough. Later, as Lily rested after lunch, Elise found Nathan in the study, her arms crossed gently over a notebook she held against her chest. "I hope I didn't say too much last night," she began softly. "You said what I needed to hear," he replied, setting aside his reading glasses. "And I meant what I said too. You're not in this alone." She lowered her gaze for a moment, then lifted it again. "She's the first child since Claire who made me feel like I was doing more than compensating. I didn't expect that. I didn't even know I was missing it." Nathan rose and moved toward the window. The sky was pale and cloudless now, the aftermath of the rain leaving everything crisp and clean. "I used to think that if I could control everything, the business, the medical treatments, the security of this house, then I could shield her from pain," he said. "But I missed what mattered most. I wasn't with her, not really." "You're here now," Elise offered, "because you reminded me what it means to be here." He turned to her then, eyes steady. "I want to be more involved, not just with Lily, but with her care, her routines, her therapies, all of it." Elise's expression shifted, not with surprise, but with relief. "Then let me help you." They spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing Lily's progress. Elise brought out folders filled with notes, hand-drawn charts tracking emotional responses, strength indicators, patterns in behavior. There were records of what days Lily seemed most tired, which meals she responded best to, what stories made her smile at night. Every detail had been recorded, not because Elise had been asked to, but because she had been paying attention. Nathan was humbled. He had run billion-dollar companies, led teams of scientists and investors, negotiated across continents. But this documentation, this devotion, was what it looked like when someone truly cared. Over the following weeks, Nathan began to restructure his schedule. Meetings were shifted or delegated. Office hours became secondary to time spent at home. It wasn't dramatic and it wasn't always easy. The corporate world didn't understand why a man like him would prioritize watercolor mornings and storybook evenings over boardroom strategy. But Nathan didn't feel the need to explain himself. Every moment he spent with Lily was another stitch repairing a bond that had frayed under the weight of neglect. He started taking Lily to physical therapy, appointments, sitting quietly in the corner while Elise supported her through each session. He watched her wobble, then steady, her determination fierce behind her fragile frame. He saw the fire in Elise's eyes as she encouraged, adjusted, celebrated each centimeter of progress. They were a team. And though Nathan was late to the hive game, he was no longer a bystander. Lily began to open up more as well. One evening, while they painted side by side, she looked up at Nathan and said, "Mom used to draw with me too." He didn't flinch. "I remember," he said gently. "She was good at drawing whales." "She was good at hugs too," Lily added. Nathan reached for her hand. I bet she'd be proud of how strong you are." Lily didn't respond, but she squeezed his hand in return. That was enough. That same night, after Lily had gone to sleep, Nathan and Elise sat outside on the back porch. The night was warm, and the garden lights flickered softly across the lawn. "She mentioned Madison," Nathan said, "for the first time in a long while." "That's good," Elise replied. "It means she's ready to remember without hurting." Nathan looked out into the dark. "I wasn't a good husband, and for a long time I wasn't much of a father either." Elise turned to him, her voice quiet but firm. "You're here now, and so is she. That's all that matters." He studied her face, the gentle strength, the steadiness in her eyes. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine what it might be like to build something lasting with someone who truly saw the world the way she did. "I've never trusted anyone with Lily the way I trust you," he said. "I never expected to be trusted again," she replied. And there it was, the unspoken truth between them. Two people haunted by different failures, united by the shared hope of one child. Not perfect, not easy, but real. As the wind rustled the trees and the stars blinked through scattered clouds, Nathan leaned back and let the silence wash over him. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like the beginning of something whole. Fridays had always been Nathan's longest days, meetings piled upon meetings, back-to-back calls with investors, project deadlines looming, and decisions that carried weight beyond the walls of his Beacon Hill home. He had learned to bury himself in the predictable structure of work, to lean into its intensity as a way to avoid the parts of life he didn't know how to fix. But something had shifted over the past few weeks. Since Elise's arrival, since Lily's laughter had returned, since the silence in the halls had been replaced with light conversation and the soft rustle of activity, Nathan found himself thinking more about home than about mergers and markets. That particular Friday, the day had started with its usual chaos. A boardroom disagreement over a new product launch, followed by a tense call with a partner in San Francisco. But somewhere between his third coffee and a calendar reminder for another unnecessary briefing, he stared out his office window and saw only the pale image of Lily's watercolor dolphins, now framed and hanging above his desk. He stood abruptly, surprising his assistant, Marcia. "I'm heading home," he said. Marcia blinked. "It's only 2 o'clock." Nathan adjusted the sleeves of his suit jacket. "Exactly." The drive home was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes with intention. The rain had cleared earlier, leaving behind the washed scent of spring. As he turned onto the familiar street, a strange tightness settled in his chest. Not dread, not anxiety, but anticipation. A question he hadn't asked himself yet. What did home look like when no one expected him? He parked without alerting the staff, choosing the side entrance. As he stepped into the house, the first thing he noticed was the music. Soft, slow piano notes floated through the hallway, not from speakers but from the old upright piano in the sitting room. He followed the sound, each step careful, unsure of what he was about to find. Then he saw them. In the center of the living room, the coffee table had been pushed aside. Lily stood barefoot on a yoga mat, her small feet unsteady but determined. Elise knelt beside her, one hand supporting Lily's waist, the other ready to catch if balance was lost. They weren't speaking. The only sound was the music and the faint rustle of movement. Lily took one step, wobbled, paused, then another. Elise whispered something. Nathan couldn't hear the words, but the effect was immediate. Lily's shoulders relaxed slightly, her focus sharpened. Another step. Nathan's breath caught. Lily was walking. Not far, not fast, but walking, with Elise holding her just enough to steady, not enough to carry. Lily let out a soft, surprised laugh as she managed 3 steps before collapsing gently into Elise's arms. She didn't cry. She didn't look afraid. She looked proud. And Elise, her expression wasn't that of a professional checking off a milestone. It was the look of someone who had believed in this moment long before it had arrived. She hugged Lily close, pressing her forehead gently to the child's temple. Nathan stepped back before they noticed him. He leaned against the wall, his chest tightening. It wasn't just the miracle of Lily's steps. It was the intimacy of it, the sacredness of a moment never meant for an audience. And yet, he had seen it, stumbled into it. When he finally cleared his throat and stepped into the room, Lily turned, eyes wide with excitement. "Daddy," she called. Elise helped her sit on the couch and stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. There was a flicker of surprise in her face, followed by something softer. "I cancelled my last meeting," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "You picked the right time," Elise replied. He walked over and knelt in front of Lily. "You were amazing," Lily grinned, still glowing from the effort. I saw. "I wanted to surprise you next week," she said, biting her lip, "but my legs didn't want to wait." Nathan laughed quietly, eyes brimming. "I'm glad they didn't." He looked up at Elise, and in that moment there were no more unasked questions. She had done what he hadn't been able to do, not because of skill alone, but because of heart. She had met Lily where she was and stayed there until she was ready to rise. They spent the rest of the afternoon together. Nathan cancelled every remaining appointment. The staff, confused at first, quickly adapted to the unusual energy in the house. Dinner was casual, takeout from Lily's favorite Thai place, eaten in the living room while a nature documentary played in the background. Lily rested against her father's side, her body tired but her spirit bright. As the evening darkened, Lily drifted off to sleep on the couch. Nathan carried her to bed, Elise following behind with the whale plush tucked under one arm. Once Lily was settled, Nathan lingered at the door, watching her breathe. "She's going to remember this day forever," he said. "So will you," Elise replied. He turned to her. "How long have you known she could do that?" "She's been building up to it. The strength has been there for a while. But the confidence—" Elise hesitated. "That came from you." Nathan frowned slightly. "I didn't do anything. You showed up," she said. "You stayed." They walked together to the hallway, the lights dimmed to their evening setting. Nathan paused, hand resting on the banister. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why didn't you tell me she was so close to walking?" Elise looked at him, eyes steady. "Because I wanted it to be hers. Not a milestone, not a goal, just hers." He nodded, understanding more than he could put into words. "She's not just healing, Nathan," Elise said. "She's becoming." They stood there for a moment, two people who had spent their lives chasing structure and control, now standing in the middle of something entirely unpredictable and real. Nathan took a deep breath. "Thank you." Elise gave him a small smile. "You're welcome." And then, without needing to say more, they each turned toward their rooms, the silence between them full of something unspoken and whole. Nathan lay awake long after midnight, not because of worry, but because of wonder. He had returned home early expecting nothing, but what he saw changed everything. The following days unfolded with a new rhythm. Lily, emboldened by her small but significant breakthrough, began to approach her therapy sessions with a renewed sense of joy. The once dreaded exercises became a game, a challenge she chose to face, rather than one imposed upon her. Every step, even when clumsy, was met with celebration, not the exaggerated kind, but quiet encouragements and proud smiles exchanged between Elise and Nathan, now united in a purpose that neither had fully embraced before. Nathan watched her closely, noticing things he had never paid attention to. The way she tilted her head when concentrating, how she mouthed along to the words of Elise's bedtime stories, the subtle shift in her posture when someone entered. The room, always slightly guarded, then relaxing only when Elise appeared. That unspoken bond between them had not weakened. If anything, it had grown stronger, rooted now in more than affection. It had become a tether, one that held Lily in a space where she felt seen, safe, and capable. One afternoon, while Lily napped, Nathan invited Elise to the study. He had been meaning to talk to her, not about therapy plans or household matters, but about something he had been carrying silently since the day of her phone call, something her confession had only partially answered. As she entered, he motioned to the chair across from him. "There's something I'd like to understand," he began, his tone calm but deliberate. "You told me about your sister, about how it shaped what you do now, but there's still something you haven't said." Elise sat, her expression unreadable. "You want to know why I really came here?" Nathan nodded. "And why you're still here?" She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. It was old, creased from years of being carried and unfolded again and again. She held it in her hands for a moment before sliding it across the desk to him. He opened it gently. Inside was a photograph, 2 young girls, arms around each other, standing in front of a hospital. One was unmistakably Elise, younger but already holding that quiet composure he had come to associate with her. The other was frailer but smiling, a thin girl with eyes that mirrored Lily's in a way that made Nathan's breath catch. "Claire," Elise said softly. "That was taken 3 weeks before she passed." Nathan looked up, the photo still in his hand. "She asked me once," Elise continued, "what would happen to other kids like her? Kids who didn't have someone who understood. I promised I'd find them, that I'd try." He set the photo down. "You've kept that promise." "I've tried, but it's not just about Claire anymore." She exhaled. "I came here thinking it would be just another assignment, another child I could help from a distance. But Lily, she's different." Nathan leaned forward. "How so?" "She reminded me of everything I lost, but also of everything I still had to give. At first, it hurt. Being around her, seeing the same fears, the same frustration. But then she started trusting me. And I couldn't help it. I began to hope again." He nodded, absorbing every word. "I stayed because of her, but I've continued staying because of you." Nathan looked at her, surprised. "You were so far removed when I arrived," Elise said. "Like someone watching his own life from a distance. I saw it in the way Lily looked for you in the mornings and didn't find you, in the way your name was always on her drawings, even when you hadn't been home to see them. She missed you, and I think part of you knew that." Nathan's voice was barely above a whisper. "I was afraid I had lost the right to be her father." "You never lost it," Elise replied. "You just forgot how to live in it." He ran, a hand through his hair, emotions swelling in his chest. "Every time I see her smile now, I wonder how much of that I missed, how much of her life I've let pass me by." "Then don't miss any more," Elise said simply. "You have the power to rewrite what comes next." That night, Nathan found himself back in Lily's room, helping her select books for the week. She insisted he read one of the whale stories, and he did, slowly, carefully, stumbling over the character voices she had come to expect from Elise. Lily giggled at his failed impressions, but she didn't correct him. She only leaned closer, her head resting against his arm. After she fell asleep, Nathan remained seated by her bed, watching the rise and fall of her breath. He thought about everything Elise had said, and everything she hadn't needed to say. About the quiet sacrifices she had made, about the way she had allowed herself to heal through the process of helping Lily do the same. Later that week, as he reorganized the bookshelves in his study, Nathan stumbled upon a folder he didn't remember placing there. It had no label, no markings. Inside were more drawings, Lily's early attempts from before Elise arrived. Most were abstract, the colors dark and inconsistent. But as the pages progressed, they grew clearer, brighter. One drawing in particular caught his attention, a figure with long hair holding hands with a small girl in a field of stars. Above them was a single word, in careful block letters. Safe. He turned the page. Another drawing. A house with 3 figures on the porch, a man, a child, and a woman with brown hair. No names, but in Lily's handwriting beneath the image, home. Nathan sat back in his chair, overwhelmed. It wasn't just progress on a medical chart, it was transformation. Not only in Lily, but in the home itself. The house that had once echoed with cold silence now resonated with warmth. And that was no accident. It was Elise. She had given more than care, she had given them back their lives. That evening, Nathan approached her again, this time in the garden where she often sat at dusk. "I saw the drawings," he said. She looked at him. "She's been expressing more through them lately. She sees you as part of her home." I see her as part of mine, Elise replied without hesitation. Nathan took a breath. Then maybe it's time we stop pretending you're just passing through. Elise blinked, caught off guard. I'm not asking for anything today, he added quickly, but I want you to know. This house is different. Because of you. Lily is different. I am different. He looked at her, the fading light casting shadows on her face. I don't know where this goes, Elise, but I know I don't want it to end. She didn't speak, but she didn't look away either. And in the stillness between them, something real took root. Deeper than obligation, deeper than affection. A truth they had both been circling for weeks, now finally spoken without a single word. It wasn't just Lily who had begun to walk. Again, it was all of them. The morning air carried the scent of fresh lilacs from the garden, their fragrance drifting through the open windows and gently filling the kitchen. Elise stood at the counter preparing Lily's breakfast, her movements calm practiced. It had been months since she first walked through the front doors of the Caldwell estate, carrying nothing more than a few suitcases and the silent weight of her past. But everything had changed since then. Her presence in the house was no longer that of a visitor. She was a thread woven tightly into the daily life of its inhabitants, the rhythm of their days quietly aligned with her own. Nathan entered the room just as she was plating the fruit. He watched her for a moment before speaking, his voice low. Do you have a minute? Elise looked up and nodded. She recognized the tone. It wasn't about schedules or medical updates, it was something else. They moved to the sunroom, the one place in the house where time always seemed to slow down. The morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting soft golden patterns across the rug. Nathan closed the door behind them, the faint sound of birdsong outside framing the silence within. I've been thinking about something, he began, sitting across from her. Something important. Elise waited, attentive but composed. I want you to stay, he said. Not just until Lily's better, not just as her caregiver. I want you to be part of this family. The words were spoken without flourish, without preamble. They landed not like a question, but a truth he had carried too long in silence. Elise didn't speak immediately. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her seat, her posture still. You mean, you want me to work here long-term, she asked, though the question felt too small for what had been said. I mean, Nathan said, I want you to stay in our lives. Fully. Not as an employee. Not as someone bound by hours or contracts. I want Lily to have you not just as her caregiver, but as part of her world, and He paused, choosing his words carefully. I want to build something with you. Something lasting. Elise's throat tightened. She had imagined many versions of her life since Claire's death. Some practical, some full of hope, others weighed down by guilt. But never had she pictured this. A man not just offering permanence, but offering it with clarity, without conditions. You don't have to answer now, Nathan continued, his voice quieter. I know this isn't simple. No, she said, interrupting softly. It's not simple, because I've never let myself want something like this. Nathan nodded. I understand. Elise looked away, her gaze fixed on the garden. I've spent so long trying to stay detached, to not carry more than I can handle. But Lily, she changed everything, and you, her voice faltered. You didn't just let me into this house. You let me into the space I never thought I'd find again. Somewhere I could belong. He watched her carefully. Then stay. She turned to him, her eyes full. I want to, but I'm scared. So am I, he admitted. But I'm more scared of going back to how things were before you. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't press or strain. Outside, the wind stirred the lilacs again, their fragrance weaving through the stillness like a promise. I need time, Elise said at last. Not to decide how I feel, I already know that. I just need time to believe that this, all of this, is real. Nathan stood and crossed the room slowly. He didn't touch her, didn't try to rush the moment. He simply stood close, his voice steady. Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere. Later that day, as Elise helped Lily with a drawing on the porch, Nathan stepped out briefly to take a call. The sun was higher now, casting light across the sketch pad as Lily concentrated. Elise guided her gently, but mostly watched in quiet admiration. The drawing was of 3 figures again, but this time they were all holding hands in a garden full of flowers. When Lily finished, she turned to Elise. "Are you going to stay forever?" she asked, like it was the most natural question in the world. Elise blinked, caught off guard. "That's a big word, Lily." "But Daddy said you make everything better," Lily replied without looking up. Elise's chest tightened. She hadn't heard Nathan say those words, but somehow Lily had felt them. "I'll stay as long as I can," she said gently. Lily nodded. "Okay." That night, Elise sat on the edge of her bed, the photograph of Claire still tucked in the drawer beside her. She pulled it out and held it in her lap. The promise she had made years ago still lingered in the air around her, but now it had evolved. She wasn't just fulfilling a vow to the past, she was creating something for the future. She picked up a pen and began to write, not in her journal but in a new notebook, one with clean pages, untouched by the weight of memory. At the top of the first page she wrote Lily's name, and beneath it, a note to herself. "This is where I choose to stay. Not because I must, but because I can." In the days that followed, Elise didn't give Nathan an immediate answer, but she remained. Her presence became more rooted, her laughter more frequent. She joined him and Lily for weekend breakfasts, participated in garden projects, helped reorganize the old library upstairs. With each shared glance, with every quiet evening spent talking beneath the stars, the answer began to form. One afternoon, while Lily napped and Nathan worked in the study, Elise found a box tucked away in a closet near the laundry room. It was marked with a year she recognized, the year Claire had passed. She sat down on the floor and opened it, slowly. Inside were Lily's earliest medical records, photos, and a few small keepsakes Madison had left behind, a lock of hair, a note addressed to Lily, and a card that had never been mailed. The handwriting was familiar, elegant, feminine, strong. Elise read the words once, then again. "My darling girl, if you are reading this someday, know that I loved you more than the air in my lungs. Life is strange and sometimes unfair, but your smile was my greatest gift. Don't let the shadows keep you from dancing." Elise folded the letter and held it to her chest. It felt like permission. Not from Madison, but from something larger, a space opening for her to fully step into this life. That night she joined Nathan in the kitchen. He was slicing vegetables, his sleeves rolled up, his expression calm. She stood beside him in silence for a moment before placing a folded slip of paper on the counter. He looked at her, then opened it. It read only 2 words, "I'll stay," and he didn't need anything more. Rain returned to Boston with the same persistence it always had, soft at first, then growing into a steady rhythm that beat against the windows of the Caldwell estate like a clock without hands. Inside the house, warmth reigned, not just from the heat humming through the vents or the soft flames flickering in the hearth, but from the sense of stability that had finally taken root. The days no longer felt like something to survive. They were lived in full color, one moment at a time. Lily had begun taking steps on her own now. They were careful, calculated, and often required the steadying touch of nearby furniture. But they were hers. Her confidence bloomed with each attempt. And Elise, ever close, guided and celebrated the process with quiet consistency, never making a spectacle of the victories, but always honoring them. Nathan often watched from a distance, his chest full and his throat tight. The weight of all. The missed years had not vanished, but something greater had settled in its place. Presence. It was on a quiet Sunday afternoon, with the smell of tomato soup lingering from lunch and Lily asleep in her room, that Elise approached Nathan in the study. She carried a thick manila envelope, held with both hands like something fragile and important. "I've been meaning to give you this," she said. Nathan set down the report he had been half reading and took the envelope. "What is it?" "A record of everything," Elise replied, "since the day I arrived." He opened the envelope, slowly, revealing a stack of documents, handwritten notes, typed summaries, photos, diagrams, even a few video stills printed on glossy paper. He turned to look at her, but she gestured for him to keep reading. "These are Lily's progress notes," she explained. "Her motor responses, her nutrition shifts, emotional patterns, her drawings, recordings of the stories she requested. Most, notes on which activities made her laugh and which left her tired." Nathan flipped through page after page. The level of detail was staggering. Every small improvement, every setback, every adjustment in care. Elise had chronicled it. Oh, not for praise, not for protocol, but out of respect. For Lily, for the journey, for the gravity of being entrusted with someone else's child. At the bottom of the stack, tucked into a separate sleeve, was a single sheet of paper, unlike the others. It was handwritten but not clinical. It held no data, no schedule, just a single paragraph. Nathan read it once, then again. "If one day I am no longer here, please continue. Continue the laughter after bad days. Continue the stories that quiet the fear. Continue the painting and the stretching and the slow walks to nowhere. She deserves a life, not just a diagnosis, not just care, a life, not just because she is your daughter, but because she is Lily, and Lily is extraordinary." Nathan's eyes lingered on the final sentence, one hand resting on the paper, the other curling slowly into a fist at his side. He didn't look at Elise right away. Instead, he stood and walked toward the window, the rain painting long trails on the glass. "You wrote this as if you planned to leave," he said finally. "I didn't know if I'd be asked to stay," she answered softly. "And I needed to make sure, no matter what, that you knew what she needed. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. She doesn't just require attention, she requires presence." Nathan turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You could have just emailed this, given me a few charts, bullet points. Instead, you gave me all of this." "I don't do bullet points when it comes to Lily," Elise replied. He stepped closer, the envelope still in his hand. "You've done more than document her recovery. You've made sure it was honored." "She fought for every inch of that recovery," Elise said. "I just made sure someone saw it." Nathan looked down at the single-page note again. "She deserves a life," he repeated aloud. "She does," Elise said, "and so do you." He met her eyes, and something shifted in him. Not a decision, but a certainty. "I never would have thought to write something like this," he said. "Even after everything, it's more than care. It's love, disguised in discipline." Elise smiled faintly. "It's both." He moved to the bookshelf, placing the folder carefully beside his ledgers and records. "I'll keep this here," he said. "Not because I'll need to refer to it, but because I want to remember what she taught us." They stood in silence for a moment, the rain still whispering against the house. "Lily drew something for you this morning," Nathan added after a pause. "She told me to wait until you were super ready before I gave it to you." Elise raised an eyebrow. "Super ready, huh?" He smiled, walked to his desk, and retrieved a small folded sheet. He handed it to her without a word. Elise opened it slowly. It was a drawing of 3 figures again, this time all standing around a dinner table, holding hands. The middle figure had bright blue eyes and long, brown hair. Below the image, Lily had written, "You're part of us now." Elise pressed the picture to her chest, her eyes closing briefly. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Nathan nodded. "Neither are we." That evening, the rain eased into a mist, and the family gathered in the sunroom with books and blankets. Elise sat beside Lily, who curled into her side like it was the most natural thing in the world. Nathan joined them, a book in hand, but mostly just watching. The envelope remained on the shelf, its contents quiet, patient. It wasn't just a dossier. It was proof of something greater, the belief that even in the aftermath of pain, in the slow recovery from grief and guilt, life could begin again, and this time it would not be missed. The early morning light filtered through the Caldwell estate's tall windows, painting gold across the polished floors and casting long shadows that reached silently into every room. The house, once defined by absence and echo, now held warmth in its bones. It was in the way the kitchen buzzed with gentle energy before breakfast, in the soft sound of Lily humming while brushing her teeth, in the low, thoughtful conversations shared between Nathan and Elise over steaming mugs of coffee before the day began. But beneath the calm routine of the morning, Nathan felt a quiet restlessness. The envelope Elise had given him still sat in the study, not as a relic, but as a reminder, a mirror held up to everything he had missed and everything he now hoped to become. He had read the final page of her note more than once in the nights that followed, not because he doubted her words, but because they grounded him in a way no financial report or project plan ever had. Lily's recovery was not linear, nor was it miraculous. It was steady, a slow climb peppered with small regressions and greater victories. But Elise had given them more than a strategy. She had given them belief. And belief, Nathan had learned, was often the most powerful form of healing. That morning he made a decision, one that had been forming slowly over weeks of quiet realizations and now pulsed with clarity. He entered the kitchen, where Elise was helping Lily prepare a fruit salad for breakfast. Lily's hands moved with careful determination as she tried to slice a banana, Elise's fingers guiding hers with practiced gentleness. "Can I talk to you?" Nathan asked, addressing Elise. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Of course. They stepped into the garden just outside the kitchen. The air was crisp, spring unfolding in bursts of green and white blossoms along the path. Elise wrapped her arms around herself, more out of instinct than cold. "I've been thinking a lot about the note you gave me," Nathan began, "and the choice you made to stay." She listened, eyes steady. "You told me once that you needed time to believe all of this was real," he said, "that you'd spent so long being careful with your heart. I understood that then, I still do." Elise said nothing, waiting. "But I realized something," Nathan continued. "You were never the one who needed convincing. I was." She tilted her head, slightly. "I've spent years trying to control things. Business, home, even Lily's care. I thought if I did everything perfectly, I could outrun the loss, outrun the fear. But all I did was distance myself from the very people I claimed to love." His voice was quiet now. "You reminded me what it means to love without controlling, to stay without promises of perfection. And more than that, you reminded me what it means to choose someone, day after day, no matter the unknowns." Elise looked down, her voice soft. "Nathan, I want to restructure everything," he interrupted, his voice firm now. "My work schedule, my responsibilities, my priorities, I've already begun. I've brought in a second-in-command to take over day-to-day operations. I want to be here, not just as Lily's father, as a partner, as someone who sees this life, our life, for what it is." Elise's breath caught, the gravity of his words settling between them like morning dew. "You don't have to make any decisions today," he added, "but I need you to know where I stand, not in vague intentions, in real change." Elise reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. "I wasn't planning to give you this yet," she said, "but maybe now is the right time." He took it from her carefully and unfolded it. It was a note handwritten in her graceful script. "I choose this, not out of obligation, not because it's easy, but because it's right. Because I believe in Lily, in you, in the life we've built. And because I finally believe that home isn't a place I enter cautiously, it's a place I help create." Nathan looked up, his chest tightening. "You already had your answer," he said. "I did," she replied. "I was just waiting for yours." They stood in the garden, the wind rustling the leaves around them, silence wrapping them in something that felt almost sacred. Later that day, Nathan called a meeting with the household staff. He announced a series of changes, reduced outside responsibilities, increased time spent at home, and a newly formed medical team that would operate from within the estate full-time. Elise would take the lead, not just in Lily's care, but as coordinator of the team, shaping the environment around Lily's continued progress. "I want this house to reflect the life we want," Nathan told them, "not the life we escaped from." He had expected questions, resistance maybe. But there was only calm acceptance. The staff had seen the transformation before he could name it. They had lived through the silence, and now they lived in its opposite. That evening, Nathan prepared dinner, a modest effort, but sincere. Elise helped with the vegetables. Lily, perched on her high stool, announced that she would be in charge of dessert, sliced apples with cinnamon and honey. They sat at the table, all three of them without ceremony, just presence. Afterward, Elise took Lily upstairs to bed. Nathan followed later, standing by the door as Elise read the final pages of a story about ocean explorers and their underwater adventures. When Lily drifted off, Elise rose and joined him in the hallway. "Do you think she understands what's happening?" she asked. "I think she feels it," Nathan said. "And for her, that's enough." They walked downstairs together, the house quiet around them. "I've never done this before," Elise said after a long silence. "Not like this." "Neither have I," Nathan replied, "but I think that's what makes it worth doing." They paused by the doorway of the sunroom, the space where so many truths had first been spoken. "You're not just staying anymore," Nathan said. "You're part of this, all of it." She nodded. "And you're not hiding anymore." "No," he agreed, "I'm here." And with that, the two of them sat together in the fading light, the quiet no longer empty, but full of everything that had taken root. The morning sun stretched across the garden in long golden streaks, painting warmth over the damp earth that had been soaked by spring rain the night before. It was the kind of day that whispered renewal, not in a dramatic way, but through the quiet certainty that something had shifted, that something had been earned. The Caldwell house, once silent in a way that mirrored its owner's solitude, now echoed gently with movement, voices, and the unmistakable presence of life being lived. Lily stood at the glass doors leading to the garden, her hand resting lightly on the frame. Her legs, still slightly uncertain, carried the weight of her body with deliberate grace. She wore her favorite sweater, the one Elise had mended after a tear in the sleeve, and a pair of lavender leggings dotted with cartoon whales. Her hair was pulled into two loose braids that Elise had done that morning, crooked and uneven, just the way Lily liked them. Nathan watched from the kitchen, the newspaper untouched on the counter. His focus was entirely on the girl at the door. Each step Lily took now was not just a medical achievement, but a declaration. She had reclaimed something that once felt impossible. And she had done it without fanfare, without needing the world to see her do it. All she had needed was presence, Elise's, Nathan's, her own. "Ready for our adventure?" Elise asked as she appeared beside Lily, slipping her jacket on. Lily nodded, smiling. "I want to walk to the tree." The tree, she meant, stood in the middle of the garden, a wide, old sugar maple that had been there longer than the house itself. Nathan remembered the day they had planted flowers around its roots, a project initiated by Elise and executed with Lily's careful instruction. The tree had become a symbol, though no one ever said it aloud. It was where Elise had first suggested Lily try standing without support. It was where they had taken their first photo as a trio, not a posed portrait, but a spontaneous shot Nathan had captured, unaware that it would become his favorite image in years. Lily opened the door and took her first step onto the patio. Elise walked beside her, her hands close but not touching, ready only if needed. Nathan followed, keeping his distance, not to be separate but to let Lily lead. It took nearly 10 minutes to reach the tree, not because the distance was far, but because every step was deliberate. Lily paused often, reassessing her balance, looking up with quiet determination. When they finally reached the trunk, she placed her hand against the bark and exhaled with satisfaction. "I did it," she said, almost to herself. "Yes, you did," Elise replied, kneeling beside her. "You did it." Nathan crouched nearby. "We're proud of you," he said. "Every step." Lily looked up at them both. "Are we going to do this every morning?" "If you want to," Elise said. "I do," Lily replied. "I like walking with you." They stayed by the tree for a while, watching the wind stir the new leaves. It was a simple moment, and yet Nathan knew he would remember it for the rest of his life. Back inside, the rest of the day unfolded with quiet joy. Lily completed a short physical therapy session, followed by an art project Elise had prepared. They painted on canvases this time, not paper, creating ocean scenes that stretched across deep blue and sea green, dotted with gold foil stars. Nathan joined them in the afternoon, helping Lily with her project, while Elise cleaned the brushes and occasionally snapped photos of their progress. As evening approached, the family gathered in the garden again, this time with a blanket and a small picnic. It was Elise's idea, to mark the day not with ceremony but with a ritual they could repeat. Nathan brought sandwiches, Lily arranged the napkins, and Elise brewed a pot of herbal tea. They sat together under the maple tree, the sky above them streaked with orange and pink. Lily lay back and looked at the sky. "This is what happy feels like," she said. Elise smiled gently. "Tell me what it feels like." "Like sunshine in my tummy," Lily replied, her voice dreamy. "And like everything is soft, even the hard parts." Nathan lay back beside her. "That's the best description I've ever heard." They stayed until the light faded, until the first stars appeared in the sky. When it was time to go inside, Lily stood again, slowly but without hesitation. Elise took her hand, not to guide her but to walk beside her. That night, Nathan sat at his desk, reviewing a final email from his office before closing the laptop for good. He had decided to take an extended leave, not because he was burned out, but because he didn't want to miss a single step of this new chapter. His colleagues were surprised. Some questioned the timing, but Nathan no longer felt the need to explain. He wasn't stepping away from his life. He was stepping into it. He passed by Lily's room on the way to his own. The door was ajar. Inside, Elise sat on the edge of the bed, brushing back a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. The child was asleep, her breathing soft, her body relaxed. Elise looked up and saw him. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. They were not guests in this house. They were home. Nathan walked to her, kissed Lily's head, and gently touched Elise's shoulder. Together, they stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind them. "I think she's going to be okay," Elise whispered. "She already is," Nathan replied. They returned to the sunroom, their usual place at the end of the day. Elise curled into the corner of the couch. Nathan sat beside her. "This feels like a life," he said. "Not just a recovery, not just healing, a life." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "That's what we were building all along." He looked down at her. "Thank you for not walking away." "I never wanted to," she replied. "I just needed to know it was real." Nathan reached for her hand. "It's real." And as the night settled over Boston, the house that had once echoed with silence now held the heartbeat of a family, imperfect, rebuilt, and beautifully whole. They had not found their way by accident. They had arrived here by choice, one step at a time. And this was only the beginning.